Will I return it? Let's talk about that. Welcome back to my YouTube channel, the place where I talk about things that I find interesting while hoping you'd feel the same. Today I'm starting a new series about product reviews. I'm giving you electrical engineer's view on the product after a few weeks to few months usage. Consumer electronics, gadgets, things I have something to talk about. I'm going to shortly describe the series here, so if you just came for the display then feel free to skip to 1 minute and 28 seconds. And we'll meet you there. Anyway, here in Finland we have quite high competition between electronic retailers, and because of that they offer us from 2 weeks to 60 days of time where you can just walk into the store back with the product and return it with no questions asked and get a full refund. This gives me a bit more leeway to take the leap of faith with expensive products like this one, so I can actually take some time with the item and familiarize myself with it before making the actual purchase decision. My partner keeps making fun of me for returning everything to the store, so that's how I'm gonna name my series. Will I return it? If I'm not home, I'm probably returning something. The series will be more of technical review side, but I'm not gonna go through the basic things and basic functionality that you'd expect out of the product and every other YouTuber and tech reviewer will cover. I will explain why I decided to keep the item or return it. This video is intended for people who have already watched MKB, HD and Linus Tech Tips videos about the display and want to know more about it. This is more of a practical review of the display after a few weeks of use. Anyways, let's get to the item at hand, which is the Samsung Odyssey G9 gaming display. It's an ultra-wide monitor, as you can see, and currently it's one of the most badass display units you can buy for your computer. I'm gonna talk about things I wish I knew before I bought the monitor, even after watching a bunch of YouTube reviews and reading through Samsung's own marketing wank. This thing is meant to be a gaming monitor. It has the functionalities like very high frame rates, and the resolution is just a tad bit higher than the 4K resolution that I'm used to. Target market for this display is mostly gamers, but I wouldn't consider myself one. I bought this just for productivity reasons. I do some gaming too, but that is not enough to justify the purchase. But when I do game on it, I'd like to have the latest and the greatest. Playing games on this thing looks absolutely amazing. But buying this for work and productivity, it's kinda questionable. I mean, you can do the same with basically 2 monitors. If you have 2 4K monitors, that would be much higher combined resolution than this one. After I purchased the monitor, I was pleasantly surprised that I don't actually need that much resolution. This one is plenty enough for my bad human eyeballs, and there's just no reason to shove high pixel density displays on your desktop computer. 5000 something pixels is way enough wide to run like 3 browser windows next to each other just fine. My GPU is RTX 2080 Super, and it's handling the display just fine with the highest frame rate and bit depth. But I would be very careful if I was considering this monitor for anything less than that. It takes quite a lot of juice to drive the monitor in such a high frame rate. Of course it will work with lower frame rates, but why pay for the extra frame rate if you can't use it? Also, I remember reading something about the monitor having issues with the 30 series RTX cards, so if you have one, I recommend to look it up that if it still has some black screen issues with the high frame rates with the 3000 series cards. It's an excellent monitor. Personally, I like the 100R curvature on the display. It feels like using 2.5 regular displays. I have to still turn my head from side to side, but coming from 3 display setup, I don't find it an issue. I find this really comfortable to use. I was doubtful that it would be like too fishbowly, but after using it for a few hours, I just got really used to it and didn't want to go back. The HDR setting in it goes extremely bright, enough to wake you up in the morning. If you open a white browser window, it will just blind you if you have HDR enabled. The menu system on this display is actually great. This is like the first on-screen display that I haven't hated. For someone who has always used 30 or 60 Hz displays all my life, going to 240 is just, it's amazing. The computer feels so much snappier, even though nothing is really different except that like there's more frames. Having something that can run this insanely fast, it's kind of cool. You can just sit there and throw a window around and call it entertainment. What I think this display is excellent for is for apps or software that has a timeline. For example, Premiere Pro with the film strip editor or Audacity or something. You can just open it with the whole ultra-wide screen and just see a lot more of the content you're making. But there are a few complaints that I have found about the monitor. First of all was that when I enabled G-Sync and was playing Fallout New Vegas, I noticed the cliffs on the background and some of the other parts were like blinking, and I had no explanation for that. I had similar issue on Photoshop with the gray background. I disabled G-Sync and it solved the issue, no more blinking. So I was running the monitor at 240 Hz and the game was running at like I think what's 95 Hz with the V-Sync enabled, and it looks just fine. If you have any idea how to solve the blinking with the G-Sync enabled, I'd be happy to hear if there's some like driver fix to it or something. I tried upgrading the firmware on the display and that did not solve the problem. Upgrading the firmware made the display more stable. I think it had some like startup issues and whatnot that it wouldn't show up, or the BIOS screen wouldn't show up on it and things like that, but the firmware update took care of it. It is really energy inefficient. I think it was like energy efficiency glass C or G or something. I can like physically feel the heat coming off the monitor. So if you are tight on your power bill or it's already hot in your room where you're gonna use the monitor, then that's maybe a consideration. It is nowhere energy efficient. Updating the firmware on this thing is absolute pain. You do it by plugging a USB stick on your computer, downloading a file from Samsung's website onto the USB stick, then plugging the flash drive behind the display. There's a USB port labeled service. And then you go through the menus here and select firmware update. Then it will complain that there's no firmware update file on the memory stick, or the memory stick is not found, or it doesn't make any sense. I looked around on the forums and whatnot. This thing is notorious that it's really picky what kind of USB flash drive it can use to do the firmware upgrade. What ended up working for me was 64GB Sandisk Cruiser Ultra USB 3.0 flash drive, formatted with FAT32, and the flash drive had other files in there too. So you just need the right flash drive. It's not about specialty formatting with special cluster sizes or anything. If you're gonna purchase one and you plan to do the firmware update on it, add one of these to your shopping cart while you add it. After that, it's just clicking through the menus and selecting the firmware update and letting it do its thing. I think it took like 5 minutes to chew through the file, and then it restarted and then it was updated. The software version I'm currently running is 1010.2, and so far it's working just fine. I work from home as an IT consultant, meaning I spend lots of my time daily in a video call and I have to share what's on my screen. I can tell you that the people on the other side will hate you for using an ultrawide monitor. They can't see anything if you put the horizontal resolution of it in a like 720 pixels wide. There is one solution for it, which I actually like on this display, that there's an option. The display has multiple inputs. There's two DisplayPort 1.4 connectors and one HDMI input. You can actually use this display as two displays. Here you can see the Windows sees this as one display that is currently active. So this is one full-size display, but you can enable a picture-in-picture mode from the on-screen menu here. And the display will tell Windows that, hey, I'm actually two displays. And I have currently two cables going from the display to the computer. One is DisplayPort and one is HDMI. Oh great, my wallpaper engine just shit itself. There we go. As you can see now, the Windows thinks there's 2 displays attached, and there's actually like 2 start menus here on both displays. And now it's easier to work with, for example, on a video call where you can just share one screen and use the other for whatever. For streaming, kind of, if you're a gamer and you want to stream your game, I would imagine this is horrible for that, as if you can only run your game at half of your screen, that's not good. And you can't really put like ultra-wide content on Twitch because there's no market for it. Not many people would like to watch 39:9 or whatever the crazy aspect ratio on this thing was. This particular unit is actually my second monitor. I bought one from the local retailer and it had a piece of dust between the backlight element and the LCD element. So if you buy your monitor, put it all white and check that yours doesn't have any dust. If you buy directly from Samsung, I hear they have like terrible dead pixel warranty. But if you have like free returns and no restocking fees and whatnot on your local retailer, you can just return it and buy a new one that doesn't have the pixel issues. The previous model was, I think, from the first batch. It had been standing in the store for quite a long time and it was on sale. And it has had some weird thermal cracking issues, meaning that when you turn the display on, it would make the glass panel at the front will thermally expand in a different rate than the plastic back cover, so it would make these kind of cracking noises for first half an hour when you turn the display on and it heats up, and it would make those sounds again when you turn it off. I have heard from the other reviews that that's a common issue, but since I got this display, which I presume is from the newer batch, it had quite new firmware version, so I believe this is from the newer batch, and there was some hardware issues in the first batch that were fixed in the later ones. So if you're in a market to buy one, I would recommend to check that your display comes from the newer stock with the hardware issues taken care of. The display has extreme contrast ratio. I think they advertised like infinite. Well, if you turn the backlight off, it's kind of black. But because of that, if your content that you're consuming is mostly black, and you have something white there like text or cursor or something, you will see a lot of background lights bleeding from the edges, light up the display area behind your cursor, so it will be kind of a disco when watching that kind of content and might be annoying. But for regular productivity use or first-person shooter games that I have played with it, it hasn't really been an issue. Maybe on some loading title the backlight has been noticeable, but I wouldn't call it a deal breaker. Something noteworthy about the display is that it's extremely heavy, comes in a large box that can barely fit in a car, and it's very weirdly shaped. So I would recommend to have a friend help you with the display if you go to the store and pick one up. Because of the weight, there's an issue with the monitor stand. The one that it comes with is fine, it takes huge amount of desk space, but if you want to use a monitor arm, you need a very heavy duty one, which are gonna cost a lot. So that's something you have to factor into the already expensive price of the display. It is a huge monitor, it takes a lot of desk space, so I wouldn't recommend it if your desk isn't huge. This is how it fits on a larger one of the IKEA Bekante electrical tables with my computer Mark 10 running on the background. There is a bunch of space behind the display, which I have filled with like audio processing equipment, and normally there's the tripod for the camera and some lights and a lot of cables. The monitor is really pricey. I think the suggested retail price is like 1,400 euros, but currently it's on sale for 1,199. I'm not sure if I can justify the price, but I'm buying it with the company money, so I get the taxes written off it, so I guess it's acceptable for me. But for the full price, I probably wouldn't recommend or buy it. But for the price I paid for it and what it offers me, how it looks, how it feels like, I have decided to keep it. Try to avoid the first recalled hardware versions. Get the newest stock if you can. And if you are having some stupid issues like your computer doesn't like getting black screens and whatnot, then it's probably advisable to do the firmware update on the display. So far I haven't noticed any ill effects upgrading to 1010.2 and I've been happy with it. I just wish there was more USB ports in the display. It's kind of pointless to have a USB hub built into the display if the display only adds one USB port to your whole system. Behind the screen there is the lighting decoration thing. It looks nice. The color can be adjusted. I think there's like maybe 70 colors or something in the menu. But keep in mind that it's in like backside of your display, so you will never see it in a setup like this where I'm against the wall. The light output from it is definitely not enough to like light up the background unless you have like completely white wall. There is a small hook for headphones that you can put in the like behind the display, but those are like really difficult and awkward to get from behind there, so for me that feature doesn't exist at all. Anyway, I hope you found the review interesting. Give it a thumbs up, and if you feel like I missed something, leave your thoughts below in the comment field. Unbox gently, keep the packaging and don't accept bad products. Thanks for watching and see you in the next video.